This way. So welcome all. Welcome on a hot Friday morning. Hopefully we roll in and get some good weather this weekend. I'd like to call to order the August 7th City of Portsmouth Economic Development Commission meeting. We do have a quorum. We're expecting City Manager Kennard in a little bit later in the meeting. I can entertain a motion to approve the draft minutes. This is from the July 10th meeting as distributed.
I'd make the motion with an amendment to the draft.
All right.
Just a couple. The version I has different dates on it.
Yeah.
So that instead of June 5th at the top, that should be July 10th, and then the minutes of the June 5th meeting down in the first paragraph instead of May 8th. So then I move the approval with those corrections.
All right. We have a second. All right. Any discussion on that?
Sorry, who was the second?
Anna.
Thank you.
Any discussion on that? Bring it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. So the next meeting on the agenda is our working groups update. So we do have 3 working groups going into this meeting, and we do have all of them have kind of come to different challenges in the road up to this mid-year. So I'm kind of calling this the mid-year reset, and I think we're going to spend a certain amount of time in this meeting on that. On paper, we have a pretty light agenda, so the timing of this is fortunate that we can spend some time on this. I'm going to really quickly hit where we are with the 3 groups because it was really hit 2 meetings ago, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I'd rather spend, I think it would be a better use of our time to look to the future. But the future of work group, so that was infrastructure needs, workforce needs, smart city, education. They were digging into the research of communities that are looking at the future work, determining the needs of Portsmouth relative to workforce, municipal goals, etc. That was our first group. Parking and transportation determined that those issues were being addressed by appointed commissioners and staff already. We have a pretty robust parking department, and the recommendation there was that the EDC have a seat on the planned transportation task force that's funded for fiscal year 2027 through 2032. Moving to the arts and culture and enrichment, similar kind of conclusion. Those issues are being addressed by various groups, appointed commissioners and staff. So they were recommending that the EDC monitor those efforts for any crossover of unmet needs in that community. There was no immediate task at hand there. So there was a working group lead meeting that Commissioner Weidman and Commissioner Sear and myself were able to attend, and part of that meeting was, kind of a what do we do, how do we reset this, and that turned into a little bit of a brainstorm, which was I think was really useful.
It's a great meeting.
Yeah, it was a really fruitful meeting, I think. I'll say that the noise coming out of my phone. I'll say that the ideas that came out of that are coming here not as predetermined initiatives. They're just ideas, and we'd like to open up those ideas for further, for further discovery, further growth in that. I'm only going to mention 2 that kind of came to the top of that meeting, and then I'm going to open this to discussion. The first one, and I'll say this one got the most excitement. Vice Chair LaChance is also, and I also had a chance to talk about this yesterday. It was this notion that as our going back to our greatest hits of where the EDC does its best work, it usually comes from a really defined assignment from city staff, city hall, or city council. And we went, I won't go over it again, but we identified some of those projects back in our January retreat. 2026 hasn't provided that for whatever reason. Council's working on different things. The mayor's working on different things as well. So those three groups that we had were more self-assigned and self-formed and self-motivated by the self, meaning the EDC group. So looking at that, how can we learn from what was successful and what had a kind of a logical beginning, middle, and end? And one of the commonalities that came out, and again, this is during the working leads meeting, was there were standout projects that looked to other similar municipalities during their discovery process, and then used what those other cities learned to inform solutions in the city of Portsmouth. So I'll give you just some quick examples of that. Outdoor dining was a shining example of that. Bike paths, or another one that happened late in the game with the Middle Street bike path. There was looking at Savannah, Georgia, for instance, for social districting recently. And there's a longer list. Skateboard ordinance looked to San Diego, California, for guidance there and what their ordinance was. So it was kind of looking at what is the city council, EDC already worked on. Is there a city or a group of cities that are a good example for one thing that may also be a good example for other issues that come up? And it was kind of creating a list or creating I think Commissioner Sear was talking about maybe a spreadsheet that had active hyperlinks in it where you could say, oh, well, we're working on microtransit. Who's done a really good job at that? And do they have an EDC? Do they have a third-party vendor that helped them with that? Click on that link. It goes to their, City of X website, and you can go from there. So that was that idea. I don't know how long that list would be, but it would I kind of was thinking of it almost as a handbook that could probably go on and be expanded forever. There's probably, just based on population, the list probably does have some sort of bracketed limit to it. I remember when we were talking about it, the largest city that came up, I think, was probably San Diego. And that was for an issue that was old.
Yeah, and I can add outdoor dining. My parameter was not population, but it was cities that had had outdoor dining design standards in place for a number of years before COVID. So it wasn't an emergency thing. And that was Aurora, Illinois, Salt Lake City, and Alexandria, Virginia were the three that fit my criteria for that. But when which none of them were population based, but it was actually, it had to have a design standards that I could download off their website. It had to have a PDF of it, and I literally printed those out and with a scissors cut out the pieces I wanted and spread it around, and that was the beginning of our design standards. So that was totally driven by those three cities. But when I look at feed in our parameters here, I feel like population really matters and geography really matters. And a quick look at what is similar with some similar problems is right in our face. It's Newburyport.
Right.
So that, I've already started digging around in Newburyport, but we're interested in seeing what city staff, because you have to have towns that you're kind of like always watching to see what they do. And I think that's what we're interested in. What towns are city staff kind of following? Because there's something in that city that's similar to a problem that we have, or a solution that we're wishing for.
Right, and it was
That's
the,
really what it was triggered from. There's always somebody that's done it before us. Nobody's problems are unique.
right, yeah, there was a discussion that all of those coastal towns, the Portland, Portsmouth, Newburyport, you can go all the way down to
Yeah, all the way,
Annapolis, it's
all the
very
way up and
similar.
down.
You
Yeah.
know, even looks like
A
Portsmouth.
lot of those have a lot bigger
They
populations.
do.
Yeah.
It was Newburyport, I think, came in at 17,000 or 18,000. It's actually smaller than us. Is that 18?
Yeah,
So I always thought Newburyport was bigger than we are, but they're not. But that's really close in size.
right.
But yeah, all those towns have.
They're not to get off on that tangent, but the another thing that's similar but different on the Newburyport and other cities is the single family home development in Newburyport pushes way closer to the core downtown than we have. We certainly have single family homes around the core downtown, but in Newburyport it goes, you know, right into very close walking distance to core downtown.
Because we tore them all down during urban renewal.
That's right.
That's true.
That's
And
right.
fire too. Fire.
So I'll mention the second one. There was a lot of excitement
Yeah, we
amongst
like
that
that.
first one. I'll mention the second one, and then we're gonna have a group discussion, and I'm looking forward to that. The second one actually is a bit of a morphing of Commissioner Sears' future work group, and he was kind of, you know, mentioning hitting the reset button on that in terms of what is the work in the future of work and identifying larger questions that the city is going to be dealing with in the future, and also considering sending them back and working closely with city staff on that, and you know, Sean and Karen, and are we going to continue to be a leader in how folks are working hybrid, the gig economy, the remote working, and are other cities and towns in New Hampshire going to be looking to Portsmouth for leadership on that? There's a whole bunch of other ideas that I can kind of infuse in during our discussion, but we have Anna and Ann, and we have Josh inputted a lot of these ideas too. So, you know, Ann, if you want to jump in with the group, or if you want to lead off, you can lead off too. But I'm going to open it to discussion, and then the objective would be, you know, taking in those ideas and then kind of doing like we did at the retreat, where we come up and distill that down into a working group. And those groups that formed don't have to stay. You know, if there's skill sets that need to move from one group to another, that's easy to do. You know, that's going to be kind of like raise your hand kind of thing and say, I'd rather be working on that. That's more in line with my skill set. But with that, I'll kind of like open discussion on that. And I appreciate everybody's honesty too on how working group meetings are going and where things are falling out with that. So it can be a challenge when you're forming a group idea, but then also forming your whole structure yourself too.
I have a question. Just thinking about these comparable cities. When you're organizing that, are you trying to find a comparable city for everything that Portsmouth deals with or faces, or are you back to having to select a topic like outdoor dining and then find your comparable cities? And so if it's the latter, does that mean we've got to sit down and identify the topics all over again? And, you know, so I mean, I can see where you say you can create this compendium of, you know, equal or semi-equal communities, and then, you know, pull a topic, and every time you add another topic, you will come up with with a volume of some size. But we're back to the beginning about how do we pick the topics and
Have topics? I mean, we have topics.
It was the later idea. The topics that we were talking about, my mind goes back to the January retreat. Yeah, I think the excitement was coming from the notion that one city that's been identified for one, best practice or case study that is applicable to the city of Portsmouth could maybe have two or three others, for whatever reason, either because of size, coastal proximity, level of tourism, all those things that make Portsmouth unique. I think that was the idea. So we'd start with a topic that wasn't identified and see if there were others, and maybe their economic development commissions are a good resource for that. I don't know.
By the way, I didn't find an EDC for Newburyport.
Yeah.
Oh. They had other kind of skirting around the issue, but they didn't specifically have us.
Is there an economic development director on staff or anything?
Planner.
Yeah, it was.
And they had a redevelopment committee, which sounds funny, but
that's
the
what
city
it was.
also acts as the redevelopment authority, and they
It was
stand up
redevelopment,
for specific efforts.
It wasn't. They didn't. So I just kind of got stuck when I hit that point. I was waiting to see an EDC and look at their meeting minutes and be like, oh, they're. But I didn't.
You know, Portsmouth is fortunate. We are rich with people who want to give back. People are subject matter experts in fields like this. So it is really hard to find a room full of people who have this kind of background and intellect and want to give back to the community. It's very rare. We're really lucky here.
You know, when I was trying to organize things the first year that I was chair, I searched in various communities, mostly in New Hampshire, to see what issues were, in common and which ones had EDCs or redevelopment authorities. And the one that it came up with was Concord. And they had they have an economic development director and a commission, and they had put together about a 3/4 of an inch double-sided, 4-color, wasn't a brochure because it was PDF downloadable, but that it almost took every building in the city and decided whether it was appropriately utilized or underutilized, and tried to develop goals for building out the city. And they were big dealing with the, if you've been into Concord in the last 5 years, the whole Main Street's been completely, redesigned and everything. So now it's a somewhat different thing because it has such a big footprint from the state, but that might be a starting point for looking at comparable. And it's about 35,000 people now, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because it's in state. A lot of the cities we were talking about were out of state, and I would encourage us to look past overseas too. There's some fantastic streetscape development.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be New Hampshire.
Right. There's a couple of really sophisticated and aggressive developers in Concord. I bet their hands were behind a lot of that work. They might have been able to not only make the recommendation, but already own the properties,
Yeah, I think Steve Dupuy.
Steve, yeah.
That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, that sounds like a Steve project, but.
Yeah, this parallel is something that I guess aspirationally the chamber's thought about over the years, and it's a lesson learned from a chamber I worked for previously, where they do like a intercity visit concept where a group of leaders from one city will go and spend maybe 2 days in another community, meet with. Talk about big picture, maybe it's transportation, maybe it's outdoor dining, maybe it's, I don't know, whatever the issues of the day are, and learn how that city is dealing with those. And then vice versa, that group then comes here. So it's sort of like almost like an exchange program where they would come here and learn from us on things that we had going pretty well. So that is a really great opportunity. The chamber I worked at previously organized that. It was a mixture of city staff, city elected leaders, just community leaders in general, religious leaders, hospital leaders, kind of a core group of community leaders. And there was a really great kind of side effect of that, unintended outcome, where that group of people, a cross-sectional group of people, came away with a shared vision for some things that could be done in the community. And it wasn't just like the city saying we could do this, it was a wider group of people that came forward with, a good, strong vision. And so I would consider, if we do go down this road, maybe casting a wide net of folks that would want to come and be part of this experience or part of this, whatever this turns into, because I think there's some real value in having a good cross-section of the community as part of it.
How was that funded?
It was, if I recall, and this has been a long time now, so I might be a little fuzzy. It was a pay-to-play kind of model, where they would, basically put together a package of like, we're gonna stay in this hotel, and we're gonna go out to eat here, and it's $400 to go, or whatever it is. Some of it, I think the city paid for city staff to go and elected leaders to go. Chamber paid for their people to go, and then elected leaders, not elected leaders, but business leaders paid their own way.
How big was that group roughly?
It was a pretty that was a larger community, so I will just kind of preface that. So I want to say it was like 30 or 40 people that went, and so it was an undertaking to organize and logistics for all that. But that was also like they were hopping on a plane and going somewhere. We could hop on a bus and go somewhere and start small and go down to Newark, or we just go to anywhere on kind of the northeast corridor that looks like us and feels like us. So I don't think we have to go that big and that complicated first.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting model to think about. Maybe we circle back to what you guys have learned from that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So, commercial on the retail side and commercial real estate, we often find that a small chain or small group of stores will always be in the same cities, and I think of that. So the question comes up: why? Why is that? So Portland, Portsmouth, Newburyport. There's a lot of three-store companies out there that show up in those. I've been hanging out a little bit in Annapolis, Maryland, and those a lot of that. That's a continuation of that chain. Same, the same sort of feel and same tourism, same waterfront, same, a lot of the same architecture, even.
History.
Yeah, older.
They have Park Mobile.
Right.
I used it there.
Right.
That's it, sister.
Right.
Sister city.
So those are. Anyway, so those are some of the things we were thinking about. In that.
I just want to maybe ask the group, like, what in this exercise are we trying to solve for? Is it the future? Like, do we feel like we have a problem here we're trying to solve, and what are those things? Are we just trying to position the city for future growth and resilience? Do we want to attract a certain kind of tenant that we're not seeing? That I think would help inform where we're looking and where we're investing the time.
I think one thing, I think I've told this story before, so I won't dive into it, but I think one thing that it would be great if we achieve some awareness, just general awareness, and I'm thinking of City Council, Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Planning Board, on just that we're not the only ones faced with these new and really hard challenges that we have. Other cities are facing that too. That my quick story is 13 or 14 years ago, I got involved and led a group that to revise the City of Portsmouth's skateboard ordinance, and there was no at that time, my feeling during that council, standing in front of that council, I didn't feel like there was this, well, how have other communities addressed this? And at that time, it was a really draconian, heavy-handed, rigid ordinance that got written quick and approved quick. I would love it if this handbook or if this list encouraged that kind of awareness that, hey, there's other communities that have gone through this. There's a way that the different groups in a community can get along. The skaters can get along with, our more elderly population, that was the initial conflict that created the really rigid ordinance. It might be a little academic and pie in the sky, but
Yeah, that's helpful. I think housing is one that not to try to duplicate work that's going on elsewhere, but I think in the spirit of that being one of our core issues, as we're looking around, like, are there municipalities in coastal areas that have solved, housing creation or brought their housing markets into balance, and get into what that looks like or what the definition of that is, but that to me would be one of the more interesting and pretty relevant as we're looking at master planning and other things.
Has anyone solved that problem?
That's my question, like, I don't.
I feel like it's just, have they moved the needle a little
Right.
bit?
right.
I don't think anybody's solved it, but did you
Well, Portsmouth's doing a lot,
make some progress?
when you
Well,
think
yeah,
about it. So there's a lot of development now. There's
1,000 residential units.
rezoned areas that are now being redeveloped as housing, so it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But if you put 1,000 units out there, or 1,500 or whatever, eventually, it's gonna help. Everyone wants it to happen right away.
I'll throw out there were some other brainstorm issues that came up that could blossom into working groups. There was examples of economic questions for the EDC, addressing cybersecurity, privacy, our energy dependence. These are also, a lot of these things came up in the retreat as well. They came up again in the working group lead meetings. Another kind of cool one, and I have talked to Sean about this, was we were talking about flash voting from specifically our business context in the existing CRM that the Economic Development Office has, that and then coming up with like really intelligent, short, succinct questions that either address something a working group is working on, or maybe inspires another initiative. And it looks like we have most of the ingredients to be able to do that.
Yes.
So that was another thing that came up. Notions of how the EDC can be a sounding board for our business community. How we can be more readily accessible, and there was a long list. I could go on, but we, the notion was we also wanted to hear from the greater group as well. If there was working group ideas that maybe died in January or didn't make it through the first quarters of 2026, or that kind of thing too. If there's something that people wanted to resurrect, those things came up too. So hearing, if anyone jumps in, yeah.
Just that one thing, I mean, I know this is being handled, but I think the childcare and the intersection with the chamber and businesses and the work that Councilor Hawkins did, it feels like, that's pretty foundational right now in terms of economics in the city and our demographic, and who can afford to live and work here and who can't. And there's a lot of work being done, so you don't want to be redundant, but
Right.
where could we lean in,
I'll just comment, I think what happened previously with the working groups, there was this deep dive that was done to understand what all was being done. And I think the concept was, if there's something missing that the EDC could champion or lead, great. If there's not not something missing, then it's a case of monitoring and looking for those opportunities to be additive to the process that's already going on in another committee, commission, or city staff department. The deep dive was beneficial, right, on the energy, that there's a 10-year energy plan to help us.
Deep dive was great.
So that's good.
Someone unearthed it.
Yeah.
People thought maybe there was a problem, but actually we learned we're kind of okay.
Right, and in the conversation and I had, that's good work. That's good work for the EDC to validate, to determine something, and then advocate for something, either with city council or the business community. There's lots of ways for this group to be a catalyst, and that deep dive is valuable, even though it doesn't result in here's a new ordinance, here's a new policy. Right?
We had that experience with the building inspections effort too, which it applied so directly to my work, my line of work, that I was really excited by the conclusion.
Yeah.
It was such a contrast just in 2 years, the amount of improvement that went on.
Right, so the value of the EDC educating the
Right.
business community is important too.
Right.
Right, there's
That's
what
exactly
people
right.
say, and then there's what's,
I still hear people say, oh my God, it's gonna take a year to get a building permit, but that's narrative in their head they heard in 2020.
Right.
And so it allows us to jump in and say, well, actually,
let me get you some data on that.
yeah, that's really turned around. We have a new guy, he's really organized, and this is what you can expect now. So that was super helpful.
Similar misconceptions, maybe this is a question for you, that are floating that we could help do some research on and then arm you with the information to say, well, what we're hearing is this, but what's actually happening is something else. Like, I think we need more direct engagement from city council when you're encountering those items.
Yeah, and that's sort of dispersion for me, like, cause I've started to personally hear directly from people in the community, which I feel is the way I'm gonna really learn. So let me take that back and think about it. I've got a couple of examples.
That would be great.
A business in the West End, I ran into a friend in the West End, there was some challenges. I mean, really, it's like parking. I'll really back to parking. But yeah, and someone I know who's living in town around some development and building stuff of a condo. Yeah, so let me think about that, but that's great.
Even
Yeah.
when you're thinking about ordinances and policies, if there's something that could be researched that could help inform better policy or things like that, I think that's an opportunity we have to contribute.
Yeah, just as an example, with all the development, I mean, city staff works really hard to hold developers accountable. Karen helped me out, the CMMP.
Construction mitigation management.
Yeah, like these developers have to commit to not disrupting the area around their development, and it's written down, and we, the city, hold them accountable. There's a CMMP. Now, the average person on the street might be, you're letting these developers do whatever they want. They're throwing their stuff in my yard. Okay, let's pull the CMMP. Let's understand it. Let's let people know what the city is holding the developer accountable for, and we have people that enforce that. At least one person. We enforce those things, and we have a legal department that will hold developers accountable for that, or an inspections department that will shut down a project that isn't following the rules or following the rules of their permit. This is stuff most people don't see every day, but they feel free to comment on it.
Are there a lot of complaints about, I mean, the complaints that I hear are the streets are impassable because of all the construction the city is doing.
That's, well, I think that flares in certain times, right? I mean,
Well, I'm not saying it's the city's fault, I'm just saying, I mean, you've got an infrastructure, it's called the street system.
oh, sure.
But what I'm saying is, before you take a deep dive into whether individual developers are, throwing trash in somebody's yard or parking,
Yeah.
for an entire block, I'm not hearing those type of complaints
No,
from citizens. It's usually, I wanted to get to so-and-so's house and that type of thing.
No, you're right, Tom, and that's the whole point about whether it's the CMFPs or the encumbrances, or how if you're doing work downtown, you have to have be able to walk under scaffolding, not block a sidewalk, right? I mean, we have all these rules in place. And I do think that, well, I'm biased, but I do think they work for the most part.
You're right, it's a busy place.
My little personal technique, and this is on Facebook, the constant, the complaining forum, is somebody complains about something recently, it's I work downtown, I'm paid $40 a day to park, and I work downtown. And all I do is go to the city website, navigate to the page on the downtown workforce parking program, grab the link, and I go and paste it in as a reply to that person. I'm not even offering an opinion, I'm just saying, here it is, and I feel like, especially parking, I drop that link all the time. Every single time I do it, somebody says, oh my God, I didn't know that there was an employee parking program, which is mind-boggling to me, that you work downtown and you don't know. But it's just an easy little, if you're trolling around on Facebook, you just drop.
An outreach opportunity to business owners to say, hey, are you letting your employees know about this parking program?
I just had a backyard barbecue discussion just like you described last week, and folks just didn't know at all that this existed. And it actually came up by reading, they were reading, it was a teacher, it was a whole group of teachers, and they were reading about the RAC program, and I said, well, do you know if you're going?
Did you know?
Yeah, and also it's a lot of this is people's first time registering their vehicle, since you can do both at the same time. And the person I was talking to happened to have a registration date that was right before you could do both at the same time. So I said, go back, go back to the office. Yeah.
And that example is having the intended effect of providing more inventory for the residents. And I know we're going off on a tangent about parking, but the resident access parking program was something requested by the council back last fall, and we're just trying to stand it up, and we've got literally 5.5 weeks of data, so bear with us. But at some point along the way, there was a suggestion you should also be building the inventory for the downtown worker program. Those two are not the most symbiotic groups, and so we're trying to meet the moment of what can we do to help both, but and there's tension, and every time you pull a thread on our pretty intricate and complex parking enterprise, it has a different outcome. So we're working with that.
And I usually direct folks to email council if they have feedback, honestly, on the parking program, because it was a council initiative. So I think people sometimes
that's a good thought,
people
too.
sometimes confuse like the city as the folks that work here as opposed to the council, and they may not necessarily understand where they can influence. So I think education and understanding like why things are the way that they are and where you can influence is key. And maybe there's an opportunity like stickers on the parking kiosks or a push notice in the Park mobile app to say, hey, did you know if you're a city employee, you're eligible for reduced rate parking? Go check out this link or something. But is there anything else we can do to make people more aware of it?
We're having a work session on August 17th at 6
It's
o'clock
so
about
fun.
all of this.
I mean, I had giant input last week from a resident who was having Coast Bus issues and had all these ideas, and I said, hang on, I have a guy. And this person really wasn't a person who could herself directly get in touch with Coast. And I took down all her stuff and sent it to Sean, and Sean sent it on to Coast, and they came back with being able to solve one of the problems. So, I mean, let us be the conduit we know you gotta get it to the right person. And I wasn't sure who the right person at Coast was, but I knew that Sean knew who the right person at Coast was, so go with the guy on the board.
24-hour response.
One other
Yeah, 24 hours, less than 24 hours, I had a response. It was great.
One other EDC potentially or city opportunity in my line of work, we do incident response testing and scenario testing where we model, like a cyber attack or a physical security issue, and then we go through our playbooks and our responses and we figure out like where are the weaknesses in how we would respond and what's in policy. I don't know if we do any of that from like a city resilience perspective where we model future state scenarios like, I'm making this up. There's no housing for workers, and what would we do? Or there's no more office space, or there's some other type of event. Because I think that type of work would allow us to simulate a scenario and then look at what we have in the city from a policy or infrastructure or support perspective to see where we might be able to influence something in the future.
we do things that are very insular to city government in that regard, but not so much looking.
The ecosystem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting.
So just thinking out loud about how do we help people get through the system. One thing this group could do was facilitate creating a PDF style one-page thing similar to what the city just did with all the land use boards, where employee parking, where can you park, how much is it gonna cost? Something that an employer, you push it to the employer, let the employer print it out for the new employee, and then that person doesn't spend 4 months paying $40 to get to something they can get for 30 cents an hour. But that's a discrete, informational, educational type of thing that we could easily do.
The thing I ran into at the backyard barbecue, I think the disconnect, besides the timing of it and her registration date, was there was this assumption that we're almost not big enough to have such a sophisticated parking department. And I said, I don't know what the number is. I'm like, we have 5 full-time people working on this. I don't know if that's the right number. And she was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, this is a big deal. Like, there's a ton of data that's going on. It was just this, and just taking that conversation, I'm sure there are other topics, and that just the level of awareness, if it can just be raised to more than just a one-on-one conversation, but it could be raised to a sell sheet like Tom's talking about, or a notification on a parking kiosk.
I would have questions just pulling from national headlines about cybersecurity of our water system.
Yeah.
Like and I don't know that that's a city staff, I'm sure, are aware. But it would be interesting if the city pushed something out about, hey, we're aware and here's what we're looking at, here's what we have in place.
The federal government has also downshifted a lot of cyber responsibilities to the states and the municipalities and are no longer monitoring at the same level that they used to, so it's a big issue.
Do you think people have an awareness that 23,000 residents, but on any given day, there's 50,000 people in the city? We're an employment hub, we're not your culture hub, we know we have tourists. Like, we're not 23,000 people. Do you think people have that awareness who aren't in the business community?
I don't know that they could put a number to it,
Yeah.
but they know there's a lot of people in town.
I think so too, yeah.
I think visitors come and they think it's a bigger city.
Yeah.
If you
it's
don't look
interesting.
up and find out what the population, you come here and think this has gotta be 50,000 people.
I think people think Portland and Portsmouth are similar sized.
I know. I
And
come
they're like,
across that all the time.
No.
Yeah, 65,000 in Portland, residents, and add visitors.
How many are
And
there?
65,000 residents, and then add visitors, add that it's an employment hub.
And their
add
visitor
there's
bump has to be
hospitals,
huge.
colleges, right? It's a lot.
Yeah, the greater Portland area is like 3 times bigger than that. When you start looking at their submarket, their submarket for what
Couple
Bob and I
100,000.
do with commercial real estate is 10 times bigger than Portsmouth. It's much bigger.
And they have land.
Yeah, just right. Industrially zoned land too. Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's a much bigger footprint and municipality, for sure. And I think just a quick comment on the awareness. I think if you're a downtown business, you're pretty aware. If you're a suburban business, maybe you're less
so
aware.
much.
If you're in the office parks, or if you're out in Banfield or Constitution or Heritage Ave, maybe you don't see the tourists.
There's a couple of people at JSA at Pease
At Pease.
who maybe come downtown once every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, literally do not ever. They live in Massachusetts, they drive to Pease, they drive back to Massachusetts.
that's where their life is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just an office park.
Well, we can move on to our next agenda item. I think maybe Sean and I will get together with the minutes that came out of this discussion. And I would encourage folks, without creating a quorum with emails, if there are ideas that come in, if they're appropriate for Sean, Sarah, and I, send them in.
I don't know how long Josh has been there.
Did he?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And then maybe I can, or Sarah and I can distill that way ahead of when the minutes, normally
Yeah,
come out
let's,
for review.
I'm available.
Yeah,
I'm here.
that'd be great. So next on our agenda is our city council update. We have Councilor Flynn here today. Do you have
And
anything
Councilor
to-
Blaylock is there, the Little League team is heading off to Bristol
that's
this morning,
right.
and so he thought he might be a little bit late, but yeah, that's why he'll come in. I had a couple of things, well, of course, the parking plan, I don't know, I think you mentioned, we're gonna have a work session on the 17th at the meeting, before the council meeting, because there's been, some of the fees were going up, and because of the feedback from the RAP plan, which incidentally, in my opinion, residents are feeling pretty good about it. It was a resident forward initiative, but the workforce downtown, I've met with some folks, and there's a petition of about 2,000 signatures. I know Councilor Bagley had met with some folks as well, to get some feedback, but all things really do lead back to parking, it would appear, but so anyway, the work session, I encourage people to come. The Vaughn Mall redesign, which I don't know if I know Ben, you were there. I didn't make the actual session, but there was a session at the public session at the library where they got some feedback. And one thing I want to say that is I learn is one of the distinctions that Councilor Cook was making around the plan for the redesign was that there was it 2017 or something, there was a study done of the Vaughn Mall, the Worth lot, and that these are really kind of two separate things. But moving forward with the actual redesign, the art installation, and the sort of separation from the work lot, all these different things, and you can find the design on the website as well. Let me see, there were 2 public input meetings. The project dashboard for the DPW. I don't know if anyone's checked it out, but that would be a great thing. I don't know how your communication goes, or Sean, you're with the business folks, but you can go and there's a map and it will show you what's happening. It's really, really great and impressive, because my thing is like, when I talk to people, like, I don't know how to get out of town because there's so much work being done on the roads, particularly this time of year. So it plays out, among other things, the road work. And I love its very literal URL. I think it says projects dashboard. Let's see, the housing action plan at the last meeting, Councilor Tabor and Councilor Kelly presented, Assistant Mayor Kelly presented some goals, a plan that's going to go now to the planning department for review, a bunch of bulleted items. They're looking for just ease of how we can change zoning and ordinances around housing. Let's see, Councilor Hopkins did an unbelievable report on childcare. I know Ben and the chamber, you all were very involved in that, and it's so impressive, like data points, how we can, and what the city might do. Again, I think there were 5 recommendations that we voted on to pass to make things a little easier for folks who might be starting up something. And then the other note I had, but I didn't know if it had come up, the Municipal Arts and Cultural Banner Program, I think that had come up at one of our meetings. Were you gonna talk about that a little bit? No. It's just been it hasn't been, it's not fully approved, right? But I feel like that came up at one of these meetings.
It's come up in general as a potential means for people to spread the word. There are some groups that might find it particularly helpful. We smile and laugh a little bit because it's a hard program to administer. We take very seriously government speech and providing public forum type areas for folks to put their information out. So we do have language that we're going to pilot next year, and we shared it with the Arts and Cultural Commission, and we can certainly circulate the policy with this group too. It will cost the potential users of the program enough money that it may end up being prohibitive. It may not be it may not achieve the goals they hope for the money that it may cost. So if you're a nonprofit and you really want to spread the word, it will cost money to print and install and put up the banners. It's not a program we can absorb, so we spent
Yeah.
a lot of time figuring out administratively what it would
Yeah.
cost to stand up.
It's another case where people travel and they're like, I was in Phoenix and the banners were amazing and we should do that here. And we're not there, but it's been moving through the process and we'll see if it'll accomplish the goals that people wanted to accomplish at a cost they can afford. We'll see. It's gonna be another pilot.
Exactly.
You like pilots.
Yeah, it's valid, right? You know, I was just combing through council agendas and notes, and it sort of stood out. I was like, I feel like this came up in one of these meetings. So yeah, that's what I had.
All right. Thanks for the report there. So next up, we have the Office of Economic Development update from Sean.
Yes, so I'll just say kind of quiet in my office on the economic development front, but not quiet on the busking, outdoor music, arts and culture. Anecdotally, the visitors are here. Hotels are seeing more visitors. Retailers are pretty happy, small sample size, but I go to the monthly retail meetings at the chamber. And I'll defer the rest to Ben because he has data, which is awesome. Some data. But other issues, I shared with my peers here at City Hall that 2025 visitors spend in the state of New Hampshire, 38% of their spend was on retail, which I found pretty, but first I was like, whoa, that's interesting, but then I figured out about the border of New Hampshire where everybody comes to shop. So, 20% of their spend is on accommodation, 13% on lodging, and another 13% on transportation and gas. So that was pretty interesting. The more exciting one was the U.S. News and World Report published a ranking for 2025, and New Hampshire finished second in the country for just to be a great state. We're a great state. and whether it's safety, education, all these things. But the top category where that New Hampshire scored in was the business environment, which I think we always score high in. But that was a pretty big deal, the U.S. News Report. The last thing I was just thumbing through, I always follow the job listings in town. And it appears that the migration of, I'll say, the younger cohort back to wherever they go in the fall has started, and you're starting to see more positions posted. So I'm curious, it'll be interesting to see how our service industries and small businesses do with this rotation into the fall in terms of employment, with just the fact that it's a different fall from last year. Maybe not that different. So that's what I have today.
I've been noticing that too. The colleges in especially I don't know, Northeast or Eastern colleges are bringing back their students earlier than I recall. I've got a daughter looking at colleges right now, and some of her friends are leaving like August 4th, and August 7th. They're all like very early dates, and it's certainly not past Labor Day. A month ahead of Labor Day, kind of leaving.
We're losing our interns.
Right.
Unfortunately, right.
Right. So it's a kind of a new challenge, and they're certainly not coming back earlier either. It's kind of where it is too, but that is a real challenge.
One last thing I did notice that American Cruise Lines is a job posting for a captain, if anybody's interested. It's kind of a cool job. Mostly inland, rivers, no big ocean storms. So let me know. I know a few people over there interested. If you're looking for a change of scenery.
Every day.
Yeah. That's how it is, exactly.
All right, with that, we'll move to Ben Data Van Camp.
Yeah, that's great. So I think people recall we had a conversation about some software that we were going to purchase at the chamber. We have moved forward with that, and we're pretty early in. We're still figuring it out. It's a pretty robust tool, and we're scratching the surface with some reports. But I can say, the data says that we are up year over year with visitors, about 5% up. about 4.5% up in overnight stays. But on the flip side of that, the length of that stay is decreased a little bit, a couple of percentage points, not a lot to be nervous about, but like 1.5% down in length of stay. So that means, instead of a third night, it might be a 2-night trip for some people. The data gives us a really great look into like how long are people staying here, and majority of our visits are 1 night, and the actual group of people that stay a second night is pretty small. It's like 20%, I think, if I recall off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up. But but I think as people have heard, the streets are busy, shops are busy, people are here. It's been a pretty good summer all around. I think we've seen it. I've heard from some restaurant tours and some lodging properties that the Canadian visitor is slowly coming back. I wouldn't say it's a big rush to come back, but they are slowly coming back. And I do think, weekends with beautiful weather for tall ships and things like Prescott Park being very robust this summer, I think really do help drive a lot of visitation to the community. So we're really excited about that. The software has an amazing capacity to give us a lot of insights to businesses and their customers, and we're scratching the surface and starting to pull some great information out of that. I do want to just share that we are hosting the chair of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank for a meeting with some business leaders here in August. They're gonna tour Lonza, and then we're gonna have a group of business leaders come and meet with President Susan Collins from the Federal Reserve and talk about what's going on in our local community, and that's something that we've been setting up for a couple months now. So we're really excited with that. We've been building a relationship with the Federal Reserve over the last couple of years, and it's really paid off in this regard. So childcare's been mentioned a few times, and we've been sort of mentioned in that conversation a little bit here. I do just want people to know that effort is not done. The city's 90-day working group may be done, but the effort is not done. So we are starting to pick that up with some leadership from us at the Chamber. Councilor Hopkins is still involved, and we're bringing a smaller group of stakeholders together to really come up with some concrete strategies of what can we do, where can we find funding, and what's some low-hanging fruit here to try to help that industry and really to help our workforce. So we're very excited about that. What else? People might have seen or heard our Street Life annual event is coming up on September 9th. We'll be at Water Country. Come dressed as you are now, not as you would come normally for Water Country. But
We'll get 1 or 2 maybe.
Yeah, 1 or 2, yeah. But that'll be September 9th, an evening event. I think it's 5:30 or 6 to 8:30 or something like that. But it's going to be a lot of fun, be a really interesting and fun evening, so hopefully you can join us for that. And then just looking past that out into the fall, we do have our annual awards that are going to be coming up real soon. We'll be starting to request nominations for small businesses of the year, large businesses, nonprofits, business leaders, all the normal award stuff that we do in the fall. And then right on the heels of that will be our Celebrate Her series that takes place in early 2027. So although this fall will be very busy, we got to work 6 months ahead on a lot of these things. So you'll start to see a lot of information come out from us about some of those. And it's just a great opportunity to recognize and celebrate the amazingly talented business leaders that we have in the community. So keep those ideas. If you see a business around town that you want to see recognized, please, you can just drop me a note and I might ping you to make a nomination for that business or business leader that you might want to see recognized. That would be really helpful.
Have you set a date for that yet?
The
Annual, maybe not.
Yep.
I don't
Sure
want
have.
to miss it.
Sure have.
While Ben's looking that up,
You're gonna have to give me a moment
I'll
to.
let this group know Art Round Town tonight, and word on the street is Chronicle will be filming.
All right.
The
Major Chronicle.
Chronicle
Yes.
video guy is sick, so they're gonna have to come back at another time.
Scratch that.
Yeah, we learned that late last night.
Okay.
Annual awards is Wednesday, December 2nd, and that's a lunch event. I believe it's at the AC Hotel.
Thanks, Ben. great event. I encourage everyone to go.
Last thing I'll just mention, since we have a little extra time, right, is that, so most people know the Chamber is a 501c6 entity like any trade organization. We have had a long time dormant 501c3 foundation that was originally created back many years ago to stand up the Harbor Trail and all the signage you see around town. And we haven't really been in that business for quite some time. I don't really know who maintains that. I assume the city now. Thank you for that. So we've had this entity out there that can unleash some potential for us as an organization. So oftentimes 501c6 entities can't go after grants. They can't receive like foundation dollars, things of that nature. So moving forward, we've kind of repurposed that organization to be broader in focus and more flexible and capable to do other things. And you'll see an official launch of this fall. But we're really excited. I think that's the entity that will go after dollars to work on things like childcare, workforce development. I think our work with Portsmouth High CTE program and Great Bay Community College and a lot of these other entities that we have some great foundational programs with will slide under that so that we can go out and get some different dollars to help fund and boost those programs. So although it sounds kind of inside baseball a little bit to have two separate organizations, I think this is going to unlock a whole new potential for us as an entity to support the business community. We're really excited about this. We've tapped into a lot of great former board members, and Joshua Sear is one of those that's been part of this effort to get this organization started, and we're really excited about the potential it has. And you'll see a more formal announcement probably in the November-ish timeframe as to what's going on there. So, but keep that in mind, and we're really excited to engage the community in that effort. So if you're interested, please let me know.
Sounds good. I'll just piggyback on the daycare topic that's come up. So the Seacoast Community School was in the newspaper this week, and during our working group lead meeting, we were scratching our head a little bit about not knowing what all the boards and commissions and that everyone in this room is on. So we're gonna put out a kind of a questionnaire about that. Something less than 5 minutes kind of thing. And what I'll offer on that is I also sit on the board of the Seacoast Community Schools, their directors board, and we're a tenant of the city of Portsmouth at the community center. And if there are questions that would be appropriate for leadership at that school, please feel free to direct them through me, and I can get you in touch. There's actually some great full-time staff that are ready to, and very open about sharing their successes and challenges as they go on. So that kind of covered two topics. Doesn't look like there's anyone here for public comment, but Sean, can you help us with the nuts and bolts of this next meeting that is at the same time as the 25th anniversary?
Sure, so
of
the group
9/11?
conversation, I passed this, gave some information about when it's happening. So I think the conversation last meeting was to start this meeting earlier and be done by the time this starts, right, which is 8:46. And the other conversation was that we would not park in the upper lot, to just stay clear so they can be set up and the ceremony will start. And it goes, it's still being worked out, but that's the latest information from the police department, who's the lead on this.
So would we start at 7:30 and end at 8:30? Is that the recommendation? Given that this starts at 8:46.
That was what we said the
Okay.
first time we were talking about that. Now we have some more concrete time.
That's just confirming
This is actually
what we thought.
This is actually better, right? This actually provides a little more time
Yes.
than we originally.
People do start congregating, but things do not start until.
Yeah, I would recommend we start at the usual time,
Yeah.
7:30, and adjourn at 8:30.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yes, this is actually a little more comfortable, I think, than we had it originally thought. And then, and this is all coming about because September 4th is a city holiday, and City Hall is not open on September 4th, which would be our normally scheduled meeting. October 2nd, November 6th, December 4th are the meetings following that. With that, I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a second? Any discussion? No. All right, with that, we're adjourned.